Now, you did just bring up something that I really want to dive into, and that's the critics. Now, I'm not going to say his name on this podcast because I'm not going to justify it, but there is a certain individual who has essentially made a career, a full blown career of targeting special operations, specifically the team you came from, DEVGRU, and trying to paint this picture that guys on DEVGRU are these unhinged murderers. They're all drug addicts. They kill without remorse. They just slaughter people left and right, et cetera, et cetera. And anyone watching this, you can Google exactly what we're talking about. You're going to find out who. I'm not going to justify it by giving him attention. When you hear people like that publish videos, 10,000 word articles about how you're just a bunch of loose cannons who go over to war and essentially just do whatever the hell you want, which we both know is not true. How do you react to that?
Yeah, I remember those articles coming out and stirring up a lot of controversy. I guess my reaction to that is that like the most important thing to realize, and not even in just this topic, what you're talking about, but even in just our society right now, like American society, and even on the individual level, is that context matters so much to everything, to each individual, to each person's life, to each situation that happens, and especially in war. Like I would tell people like that, like listen, context matters. But my reaction really to that is, I don't know what the intention of these people are. If the intention is to make a career out of this sort of like toxic picking apart of individual operators and missions and these different things that happen, and sort of confining them to trying to portray them as war atrocities is ridiculous, because each and every one of those stories has a lot of context behind it. There's so much that happened before that, there's so much that happens after that. And so unless you're willing to actually do journalism and go um, identify all of that context and explain all of that context, which would take a lot of work, then I just ignore it, because it's nonsense at that point. It just seems like you know people taking advantage of something in order for to make a name for themselves or something.
Right. And I think the way that I would look at it, and I think the way your average person looks at it, is in any career, whether it's teacher, firefighter, Navy SEAL, mechanic, there's good people and bad people, right? And you could
Yeah,
have 99% good people and one
yeah,
bad person. That doesn't mean that everyone else is also a bad person.
yeah,
But that's what sells headlines, right? Like if I can paint
exactly.
this disgusting picture, that'll sell books, that'll sell headlines.
Yeah, like negative sensationalizing just gets so much more of your attention drawn towards it than anything
Right.
positive. So of all of the amazing, badass, like super honorable, heroic stories that I know of, and being surrounded by teammates all those years that were just virtuous, honorable, good guys, we selections intentionally draw certain personality types, right?
Hmm.
And that has to be that way, or else it won't work, right?
Right.
Um, and there's a lot of methodology, there's a lot of study and research behind those selections, um, to make it what it is. But my point being that in all my experience, like, yeah, there's been a couple bad apples. There's been guys that were really good that turned bad for some reason, for some traumatic thing that happened, or whatever the story was. But like my point is that those are all stories that matter.
Right.
But generalizing, one thing, we're doing this right now in our society, one thing happens somewhere, and now we go, oh my God, there's a huge problem with this now everywhere. And it's not true. It's exacerbated and exaggerated, to the point that our minds start to think like, wow, there's now this like really huge social problem going on. And yeah, it may be a problem, but what is this actual scope of the problem, right? And how is it being used to distract us from things that really matter that are going on? So it's the same for those stories with writers like that guy, where it just has drawn attention so far away from the truth, right? Which is we need our warriors in this country,
Absolutely. One of the things that really has always stood out to me about the United States military is how our military goes out of the way to protect innocent people. Like we're talking hostage rescue. Our military is trained better than anyone in the world that you're not going to shoot someone unless you absolutely have to, right?
Absolutely.
That, and we pride ourselves on that. The Russians, they'll go in and massacre a whole billion of people. They don't give a damn. Do you think people have a grasp on how controlled you guys need to be? I mean, you're talking about situations where bullets are flying at you, and you still have the training, the discipline to just protect civilians at all costs. Do you think people understand the effort you guys are putting into that?
I don't think so. And it's sort of to explain this is feels like I'm sort of combating some of that language towards those assumptions. But yeah, we don't train to kill women and children. If it's happened, there's a specific reason and story and context behind why that happened, to include bad guys using their own families as shields, and I've
Right.
experienced that several times. And even in that case, we would try our best not to hurt innocent people. But like I said, it's war, and depending on the situation, there's some pretty intense situations that have happened, to include bad guys blowing themselves up in their own house and killing everybody else.
Right.
Right? So um, there is a level of discussion that needs to happen when you talk about that, like in the hostage rescue scenario. Um, One thing that helped me sort of psychoanalyze that with myself and come to terms with it was the fact that, like, hey, these dudes, they didn't take their sons down into the tunnels when they
Right.
figured out that something was going on. They took the hostages and left their sons there to die, potentially die, right? In danger. And when I think about that, I don't know, whether it's first world, third world, second world, whatever world, there is an attachment that we have to our family and our loved ones and our children that makes us human, right? And we're still nature in that way, right? We're not technology yet. Someday we might become that, right? But right now we're still nature. So when I think about that, it that is something for sure I would use in a debate with somebody in the media about that fact that we have killed, women and children in some instances for some reason or something that happened, but for sure it was never intentional. And when you think about the adversary, that matters also, right? The fact that they would use them as shields, that they would blow themselves up among their loved ones, and not just die honorably, right? And let those people that they love live, was just a huge thing for me that affected me for a long time.
I mean, let's think about it. The last two heads of ISIS both blew themselves up with family members around them instead of either one surrendering or two trying to bang it out with the guys on the ground. I think your point about the adversaries is important, and I hope the viewers are listening because we're not talking about uniformed soldiers, right? We're not talking about people who just surrender. You said earlier you have children. Could you imagine a scenario unfolding where you would just abandon your sons and make a run for it?
No, absolutely not. And so then I think about that even deeper and like what can cause that? And really that's the power, in my opinion, that's the power of ideology, right? Ideology can affect us so deeply that we detach from our natural connection to our loved ones in that way, right?
It's just jarring. It truly is. I'm 30 years old. I'm a little bit younger than you, and I can't wrap my head around it. But I do want to